Well, Nick, I can't answer for all the players. I can tell you that, as to me personally, he paid a great deal of extra attention that not very many people knew about at the time that season was going on. And so I can't say that in the little time we got to know each other between when he showed up and the football season going, I can tell you because of a personal, how my life was going, he and his wife would come by my house and check on me regularly to see how things were going. I accused him of doing it only because he wanted to see if anybody was over there drunk. Was I eating, stuff like that. But as time has gone by, I didn't realize that we had grown as close as we had until he started calling me when I was at Arkansas. And he had made the choice to go coach somewhere else, and he was looking for football players, and Arkansas and Texas would run off, 30 or 40 a year just by the process. And I said, yeah, they ran off 4 high school All-Americans today. And he said, well, give them my address. So I can tell you that truthfully, by the time we had his reunion, at the 40th reunion when he was inducted in the Hall of Fame, that I truly loved the man. So.
How do you really embody that father figure?
He was more aloof than a father figure. He didn't come in, he came in as the general, and he had his brigade of coaches. As I've learned through my life, all coaching staffs have at least one screamer and mean guy. He was the head guy, and nobody wanted him mad. He had dark brown eyes that would just pierce a hole through you. Very regimented, but he wasn't warm, cozy, and fuzzy during the season, nor during the time he was trying to get us ready to play a season. So, father figure's a little strong. Not many people knew it, but that he was coming to my house, and it wasn't anything I wanted to brag about because it had something to do with my personal circumstance. And when he was bringing his wife, and he and I'd be sitting in the den or living room, and his wife would wander through the house, I realized after the second time of doing that, they were really spending some of their personal time checking on me. He wasn't over there asking me tactics of how to play the game.
Tell us about the other assistant coaches, including Lyndon Hensley and others.
Recently, we had a guy named Jerry Behrens die, and he was our designated screamer. He played his college ball at West Texas State in Canyon, Texas, which is where Mayfield played his college career. He's the only coach that stayed at Permian that was there prior to Mayfield's arrival. He had only been at Permian 1 year, and he later followed him up. And Jerry Behrens, to me, was always on me, always. I separated the shoulder in the second game of the year, the Lubbock-Monterey game, and I played both ways, offense and defense. There were about 4 of us that played both ways, and Behrens was always on me. And, get up, get back in the game, you're tougher than that, you're better than that. Never pat you on the butt, no feel-good stuff. When we got through with the last game of the year in San Antonio, against San Antonio, played in San Angelo, I couldn't get my shoulder pads off. It was nasty, filthy, dirty, cold, mud everywhere. It was a terrible circumstance to play a game in. And I'm just sitting on the edge of the bench. I mean, everybody that played both ways, nobody could move. I mean, we were beat up. And all of a sudden I felt these great big paws of hands lift the shoulder pads up over my head, and he grabbed me and hugged me and said, I love you, and I'll be damned if, sorry audience, that from that point on, as now a graduating senior, we grew very close over the years and stayed in touch all the way through the time he died. He came to the reunions, he did the stuff with us, but he always was concerned after his coaching career was over that he was too rough on us. and that he'd been too mean to some of the people. But as it turns out, nobody took it that way. And he was just shocked when I'd say, Coach, that's just not true. Hensley was just a water bug. You ever seen a water bug going across a fishing pond? He was just jumping all everywhere. And he's still doing that. He's 80-some years old and he moves across the water just and he was just running everywhere. He was also the special teams coach, and they called the players that covered the kickoffs Hensley's hounds. You know, he'd just take them and just turn them into heroes, and they made great plays. Gene McCandless was a technician, and for punishment, instead of screaming at you, he would give you a thump, and you take off your helmet, and he'd take his middle finger, pull it back, and thump you between your eyes. Now, apparently because of practice, and maybe he worked it out a lot, he could almost knock you down. He died, a number of years after Mayfield's induction, and he lived in Odessa till the time of his death. Barron's moved up to Canyon and went up there with Mayfield to coach, and when Mayfield left there, Barron's went into private business. So that was the history of the four main coaches that I knew and saw. So you didn't work with all of them unless it was your position coach, and we didn't have much time. It wasn't like the juniors that had them all that time, and then all the off season for the new year, you know, the new coming up year. So they may have had a more close, well, there's no doubt about it because I'm in touch with them all the time. They were more closely associated with those coaches on a personal basis.
Do you remember the first time you ran the sandhills at Monahan's? What was the sand like? Was it hard to run? And did some of those players ride their bikes from Odessa to the Monahan's before the workout?
I know a fact that two players, juniors, because they weren't very smart, rode their bicycles the first time. And if you've never seen the Monahan sandhills, I would classify them as more than sandhills. And was it hard to run? Have you ever run on a beach? That's not as easy as running on a track. Running up and down the sandhills was the hardest thing I think I've ever done in all of my training for all of the years, including everything at Arkansas. It was a nightmare, total nightmare. And I got a text message or an email because you and I discussed that issue, and I asked this junior, I said, did you ride your bicycle up there one time? I said twice, and it was a big mistake. But I don't recall the first time from the last time. When I heard where we were going, I knew it was going to be a long day.
What was the state of the team mentally after the loss to Lubbock Monterey in week 2? How special was it to beat San Angelo 8-7 and eventually win the district title the final week against Odessa?
Back to the Lubbock first game, it was our only loss. I don't recall the score, but I will tell you that's where I separated my shoulder. The starting offensive, one of our captains, it was a starting offensive center or end, hurt his ankle, and somebody else, some major player, got injured. They fed us in Lubbock that night after the game, and I was sitting with a man named Glenn Hossel, who was our All-American middle linebacker, All-American guard. Went on to your school, the University of Texas, and was, I think he's still the fourth leading tackler in the history of the University of Texas. He was a football player. And he was just shaking his head. He wasn't going to go through the torture they were going to put us through. This team was not motivated by as much about winning, I want to win, as they didn't want to lose. And I said, Glenn, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. You're out. You got a separated shoulder. Carr may not be back. We already lost in preseason. We lost 2 players. I'm just not going to go through all this. Now, this is the toughest guy on the team. The state was bad for the seniors. I can't speak for the juniors, but the seniors had been together you know, 3 or 4 of us had been together. We were on varsity as a sophomore. We were tired of 8 and 4 seasons or whatever we played. We didn't. That wasn't our idea of what we thought we were getting into. Playing San Angelo, I don't think any of us ever had a doubt we were going to beat San Angelo. I don't think we ever had any doubt as a team we were going to win every game we played. It just wasn't anything that occurred to us. We weren't cocky about it. We just knew that if it got close, it got to the end of the game, we were going to win. And our conditioning was, it's as well a conditioned football team as I've ever been around. And they could play. And if we were ahead by a point in the fourth quarter, nobody had any doubt we could stop the rest of the teams from scoring. I mean, it was just that sure. And nobody spoke it, nobody said it. It was just inbred. I remember looking up towards the end of the game, and I'm looking at the scoreboard in San Angelo. I guess we actually played that game in Odessa, and the score was 7-6. And I looked up and I said, "This looks to me like a baseball game." You know, we had a fake field goal of all things. You know, a gadget play. Well, later on, we had a reunion in Odessa, and Billy Dale invited one of his co-players from Texas, played at University of Texas, to come eat with us, and he got up and told us that they were singing songs during the halftime and what have you, and they knew what play we were going to run if it got to be a tiebreaker. And I couldn't stand it anymore. And I said, "So you knew what we were going to run and we crammed it down your throat anyway?" I said, "Don't you wish you'd quit singing and started working while we had halftime?" One of my coaches grabbed me Barron's and said, "That's enough, sit down." You know, don't start a problem.
So we have video of the 65 by-district playoff game against El Paso Bel Air. What do you remember about beating them 14-7 at Old Barrett Stadium?
I don't remember the score. We were up, or is that what we won by?
You beat them 14-7.
I remember they were a lot bigger. It was a day game. They ran a really funny offense or defense, and it was just another football game, actually. You know, it was win or go home. And so if we were winning, it didn't matter if it was 1 point or 20 points. But they were big. Everybody kept saying we were bigger than advertised, and that may be the case. I may have been in a program at 185 and actually been 198, 199. These guys were big. You couldn't camouflage how big they were. But it was a good game, as I recall. I saw that little 2-minute Super 8 film, and all you can tell is it's a bunch of people running into each other, and wasn't much clarity to it.
Talk about playing at Barrett Stadium.
Well, I guess in the 3 years I played in Barrett Stadium, the San Angelo game was the biggest. I'd never seen anything like it. I don't know what that stadium held. I know they brought in special seating. I know they put up some fences to try to keep people away from the field. I know that there was a pep rally where I think the whole town was at. But it was, I think, the first taste of all of us had of some kind of, this is really turning into something. That it's, the whole town is behind you. Even the cross rival teams, they were for you. I don't know how Mayfield convinced them that San Angelo was a neutral site to play the state championship game, but he did, and that's where we played. Well, that's like playing on your home field. Like I said, there were a bunch of us who played every other year, so we played on that field as many times as we had in Odessa. Plus, San Angelo wanted us to win, and the team captains came in and talked to us because they were picked to win state. To get out of our district, we had to beat 3 or 4 teams that were rated in the top 10 at the beginning of the year. We weren't rated in the top 10. I don't think we were in the top 15. So the San Angelo game was where I realized this is really getting special. There's something going to happen here.
How did it feel to avenge the earlier season loss to Lubbock Monterey by beating them in the playoffs?
I can truthfully tell you that I believe it's the most intense I've ever seen all my friends. And I played football with these boys since the 4th grade. This wasn't our first time on the football field together. It is the first time I saw everybody knowing we were going to win, and we wanted to hurt them and run it up as big as we could run it up. What was the score? Do you remember? I think it was one of the ones where we had a pretty good score. We weren't known as a scoring offense. We were running a straight tee, and it was 3.5 yards and start again, So it was, in retrospect, looking back at it, it was a fun game to win. It was fun to see them not be able to stay up with us in the 4th quarter. They could not play with us in the 4th quarter. And that's the difference between the beginning of a year, with a team like Lubbock had, and they'd been together forever, and a team like us that had just had brand new offense and defense put in. By the time we got to them again, we had an offense and a defense put together. And they couldn't physically stay up with us. They just couldn't do it. So it felt good. But I will promise you, nobody celebrated it that way. It was the next morning we knew we'd be in the field house getting ready to look at films of who we were going to play next. After the Bel Air game, the first playoff game, that next morning we were looking at films of the 2 teams we might play in the next go-around. It was a 7-week-a-day job. So about that point in time, we had a little team meeting, and we as a team decided we were working out twice a day was just killing us physically. And the story goes that the team voted for the captains to ask Mayfield if we could stop working out in the morning. We knew he wasn't going to stop working us out in the evening in full pads, because we stopped the morning stuff. And apparently he looked up from his desk and whatever he was doing and said, "Do you want to win state?" and went back to writing whatever he was writing. And they came back and they reported it to us that way. And I said, "I guess that means no, huh?" So I don't know if it's more funny now than it was then. It wasn't funny then.
So beating Texarkana 28-21 solidified a spot in the state title game. What do you remember about that feeling of playing for a state championship?
Well, beating Texarkana was a big deal. They had some great players. They had a quarterback that was maybe the best quarterback in Texas that year. Knowing we were going to play in a state championship was no different than what we had done the week before. Mayfield kept it on a plane of we're just going back to work. Now, I didn't know this till well after I graduated. The seniors graduated. That Mayfield and his crew had been to the state playoffs almost regularly, and had been to a state playoff championship game, but that he had never won that game. So I think the coaches were more intense than we were. But it was it was again not getting caught up in what the whole town was. I mean, it was outrageous. The crowds at the games, it was just outrageous how many of them would show up. But it was a special feeling. It was just a really bad day. Nasty, cold, rainy. And we were playing in San Angelo, like I said before. It's like playing on our home field.
Driving to San Angelo and getting ready in pregame warm-ups against San Antonio Lee must have been exciting. So what was the emotional state of the team early on in that game?
Ready to play. We wanted to play.
It was a low-scoring game, and at one point was 4-0. Did it almost feel like the first team to score a touchdown was going to win?
It was going to be the first team that didn't make another mistake. The ball was wet and nasty. There were some interceptions, some fumble recoveries. Hensley's Hounds turned it around, I think, by recovering on a kickoff, a fumble. Somebody that may not have played very much made an interception. It's what this team always did. Nobody ever had any doubt that everybody on the team was going to play as hard, as good as they could. And from my personal standpoint, all I wanted to do was not lose. Nobody understood what I would always say. Did you get excited about wanting to win? I didn't want to lose. So after that game, like I told you before, I was so tired and beat up that I had to have help getting undone, getting your shoulder pads off. And when that coach took them off, there were some players that couldn't move for 30 minutes needing to rehydrate. And there was celebration. You could call it celebration. There was screaming and hollering and, go get clean and let's go home. I don't think it really set in, at least to me, it didn't sit in my brain that we had in fact won, what the significance of that was going to be. And as it turns out, it's one of the significant points of my life. People I'd known since the third or fourth grade, played ball with or against, it all of a sudden done something nobody ever thought we'd do. And now we're still just as close. This team, we have our own Yahoo private site that we chat on. People still know about grandkids getting born, people dying. It's a close-knit group of people. This team didn't fall apart when the season was over and everybody ran off to college. We stayed close the whole time. I remember when we played Texas Tech, I'd sit on the 50-yard line after the game and talk to the players that played on our team that were playing for Tech. So it was, the jubilation didn't, for me personally, I'm not a jubilant person, but there was a lot of happy people. Now, Mayfield was real happy. I overheard one of the coaches, we did it, we finally got it done. And they did.
How did it feel winning a state championship game?
Nick, I can't remember any emotion different from winning any other game. Some of it was a sense of relief. We weren't going to be going through the same pressure not to win, not to lose. We were going to. The happiness came in about 2 or 3 weeks later. For me personally. But my circumstance was a little bit different. So most people were moving on with their lives at that point. Most of us, Coach Mayfield didn't allow, and apparently this was what they did back in those days. The guys that were going to be recruited to play in college were never allowed to be talked to if they were still playing ball. If you were in the playoffs, you didn't know you were getting letters or somebody wanted to see you. So the next Sunday, the next day, I don't know if you played on a Saturday or not, but you start getting called into Mayfield's office and you're getting a stack of mail. People want to, and you're thinking, do I even want to play football in college? I'm still feeling bad. My shoulder was still hurting. I still had bruises and cuts that were healing. So I'm more proud of it and excited about it today than I was back when it happened. There were other guys that were about to kill themselves being so happy. I think it's just a personal feeling. But I know Coach Mayfield and his boys were happy.
Just go through your memories of that class of 1966 and winning the first state title in Permian history and what that means to you.
In retrospect, what it means is we were the foundation team upon which other teams were going to be built, and it showed with hard work, good coaching, and dedication that Odessa Permian could be where it should have been for years. And that is, they should have been in the mix of winning championships in the playoffs. Because we had great athletes that went through there, that were on teams together that should have won. Now, none of us had any playoff experience. The seniors, we hadn't had playoff experience. We didn't know what it was like to get in that mix. When all of a sudden somebody said, "Hey, did you see a newspaper today? We're rated number 4 in the state." We didn't follow that kind of stuff. We had a lot of parents that did, but players didn't. And all of a sudden it meant that. And I think that team was used and held out pretty significantly in the future by coaches who came in to take over teams. And the talent had to be there. You can't take no talent and win a state championship in a major division. You can't do it. You can't get lucky that many times. But in retrospect, it's significant enough to say it's up close to being with the birth of my children. As I sit here today, because of all the events that have followed over the years, some of our friends have died. We go to Mayfield's induction, and he announces to us in a team huddle that he has Alzheimer's. It took the air out of the room, and so because I'm used to talking for a living, I didn't think everybody could talk. And I said, "So, Coach, does that mean you forgot everything I screwed up?" And he's turned around and said, "Absolutely not." And everybody broke up, But it was the last time I saw him. There were 2 players that were at that reunion that died before the next one, and that was only 10 years. And those deaths, one of them in particular, were catastrophic for me. I've still got me a picture of me and I on my drain board in the kitchen. That's how close we were. And the camaraderie of this team has stayed the same. They're closer. They help each other more. They pray for each other more. There's somebody always goes to the funeral of a teammate, no matter how far away. At least one of the teammates goes. I don't think that happens very often, if ever.
Through your development as a person, how much did Gene Mayfield and the brotherhood of your teammates really mean to you just growing up and becoming a man?
It taught me the true meaning of what hard work, dedication, and not listening to what anybody else told you, knowing that you could do something. I actually used the Sandhills in a trial one time. That I had a 3-month trial, and everybody had lost 15 or 20 pounds, and it was a nasty fought deal. And the judge walked by and said, "Well, you've lost a lot of weight. You look real tired. This will be over in another couple of weeks, but you keep going stronger. What makes you do that?" And I said, "Coach Barron's in the Sandhills." She looked at me. She said, "Are you hallucinating?" And I said, "Well, you asked me what's making me know I can keep going. And I know I can keep going because you have to be in shape to try a case for 3 months. You just don't walk in there every day." And I didn't ever look pretty, but I went in there thinking I looked pretty. So it did teach me what mental toughness really meant. You always hear about mental toughness. You always hear about hard work and dedication and how that'll overcome maybe some of your personal shortfalls. That team and that coaching in that year taught me what that really and truly meant. It no longer was just hollow words that some coach scribbled on a blackboard. You know, work hard, you'll win. This is the first time I ever saw it happen, and that influenced me all my life.
Does that hard work, you think, translate in the definition of mojo?
You know, the mojo stuff, we weren't mojoing during my year. That mojo came up maybe the next year or so whenever they got in another playoff. I don't know exactly. I've heard 3 people I know claim credit for having sat in the stadium and made it up. I don't know how it happened, but there was a song out at the time that had something about your mojo in it. And, I think it solidified the entire student body of our class believed they were as important to winning a game as were the players. The pep squads, the band, you know, was tremendous. I've heard a rumor, don't know if it's true, that when the other team would be down on the section where the band was playing up in the stands, and the band would stop playing while the other team was down there, and that Coach Mayfield met with the director of the band and said, "Don't stop playing when they're doing that." And the guy, I think his name was McGuire, they had the top flight band in the state for years. I mean, the band was a big deal in Odessa. They were excellent. So it permeated the whole school. You know, Latin teachers and calculus teachers that you were convinced hated football players. I mean, they were, if I had sniffles in a math class, the teacher would be over there with a box of Kleenex, you know. "Are you all right, Mr. Paddock? Are you all right?" I'm saying, "I'm fine." You know, "You'll be ready for Friday now, aren't you?" All of a sudden, you got professors that had never shown any interest in football, now involved. So it was I can tell you that everybody that was involved in any of those organizations remembers that year more than any other year they've had. It was pretty remarkable.
Do you have any final thoughts on 65 or Permian in general?
Well, I saw in 65 something happen that I'm not convinced has ever happened in Texas high school football, ever. And that is a coach comes in with a complete new staff, a complete new offense, a complete new defense, and in a period of less than 8 months takes those people that he inherited and turns them into state champions. I think that's the most remarkable story that I have ever seen. I ask all the time how it affects me in my life. I've been as far away as Louisiana. Now, Louisiana doesn't sound far, but it is far compared to life. And you're in the middle of nowhere, Louisiana, and some judge is asking you where you're from, and you say Odessa, Texas. Did you play for Permian? And it's amazing how many times I've been asked that. The fellows that travel for a living that go to Europe a bunch, where they always run across somebody that's heard of Odessa Permian. Some of it because of that book, some of it because of the movie or the whatever they've had, a series. I've never watched any of it. But I read that book. I had a bunch of friends send me the book. I ended up with 6 copies of Friday Night Lights. And after I read it, I called the author of the book, and he answered the phone. And so I said, "Say, that's not the Permian I went to." And he said, "Absolutely not." Said, "You guys were a different breed. You had a coach that was a mentor. He was a coach. They all taught subject matter courses. They weren't just your disciplinarian, teacher where you went to being a bad guy, you'd sit in the study hall or something. They taught significant classes, and he said, so you had the set of coaching that was different, where the whole your mannerisms, your how you dealt with success, so that other teams apparently that followed us didn't have that same. They may have been as good a teams or better, who knows, but it apparently changed the whole climate out there. Some good, some bad. It created a mystique where, as one daddy told me who followed the team even though he didn't have a kid playing, he said, it's very exciting to know every year we're going to be in a playoff or close to it. But to tell you the truth, I think it's ruined the state of high school football. This is almost like trying to play college football. It's taking it. I don't know what coach in their right mind would want that job. Everybody forgets you don't get to recruit your players. You just walk in and hope there's a bunch of them that show up that can play football, or you can teach how to play football. That doesn't always happen. And when it doesn't happen, whose fault is it? It's the coach's fault. I was there during times where coaches would wake up in the morning and have 30 or 40 for sale signs in their front yard. But it got worse, as I've been told. I don't know.